brisk autumn on the island of Soda. The weather began to cool, and winds started to blow across the island, stronger than usual. Particularly on the viaduct did the bigger engines notice a strong whistling coming from below the arches. It was shrill and strong, and would persist until long after you were off the bridge. It would conjure ghostly stories between them, and they would all have a go at trying to scare the others. None enjoyed a good ghost story more than Percy. He would try to scare trucks, coaches, and engines alike with a shrill whistle, which often got him into trouble. It was evening at the sheds. Gordon and Henry were discussing the whistling on the viaduct when Percy arrived.
"I've been across many viaducts in my time," Gordon said, "but never have they been as loud as ours."
"They're thinking of putting a slow order in place, just in case the wind blows my trucks over." Gordon snorted.
"Ridiculous. It'll be my express next."
Percy cut in.
"You'll have more things to worry about than your express falling over," he chuckled. "I'm sure your dome won't appreciate another trip to the river."
How very droll."
Gordon rolled his eyes. Percy laughed, and then tried to sound serious.
"I know where the whistling is coming from."
"So do we," said Henry and Gordon together.
"It's the wind."
Percy smirked.
"Oh, no, it isn't. One of the workmen told me a story that happened at the station next to the viaduct."
The two big engines were skeptical and gave each other a look, but they were intrigued, and so listened as Percy told his tale.
"Jack and Jill climbed up the hill to fill their boilers with water. When Jack broke down, he melted his crown, and Jill followed shortly after. As Jack went up with a final puff, he scattered across the yard. Jill went out with a noise so loud it could well be heard from afar. In the dead of night, you'll hear labored puffs up the hill, a hoarse screech, and then, boom!"
Percy finished and smiled. Gordon and Henry looked at each other silently, and then burst out laughing.
"Oh," guffared Henry. "What absolute nonsense! Silly Percy, that workman must have been pulling your wheel."
Percy was indignant.
"It's the truth."
Henry raised an eyebrow. What did Jack and Jill look like then? The little green engine stammered. Just then, Thomas pottered by, and Percy had an idea.
They had 6 wheels, and short stumpy funnels, side tanks, and silver paintwork,"
he finished, trying to sound as confident as he could. The two engines weren't convinced, so Gordon then asked,
"Which hill was it, then?"
"Your very own,"
Percy said in an ominous tone.
"When?"
"I don't know," Percy flounced. "Workmen don't know everything."
Gordon grinned.
"Now that we can agree on."
"Well, Percy," the big green engine started, "it's all well and good telling us your story, but you're safe here in the yard. If your story was true, then a brave engine like you would go out and see these ghosts for yourself." Gordon continued.
"Oh, yes, we'll have to believe you then."
Percy didn't want to seem scared, and so he said,
"All right, I will then."
As Percy went off to speak with the foreman, Henry smirked at Gordon and whispered, "I've got a goods train tonight. I'll rush past and scare the daylights out of him." Gordon and Henry chuckled to themselves. Percy, meanwhile, was speaking to the yard foreman. He asked if there were any trains he could take to the station by the viaduct. The foreman checked the schedule, and lucky for Percy, there was. He felt a little uneasy as he shunted his trucks.
It's only a story,
he reassured himself.
I'll just tell Henry and Gordon I saw the ghost and wasn't scared. That'll show them.
He collected his guard and set off down the main line. The sun descended quickly as he made his way to the station. By the time he reached there, it was dark and fog had rolled in.
This would happen tonight,
Percy muttered to himself. He shunted his trucks into the siding and was about to head home when there was bad news.
The points to the main line are stuck against you,
the signalman called from his box.
There won't be anyone available to fix it until morning.
Better and better,
Percy felt, as if luck wasn't on his side. The crew dropped his fire and settled him in a siding. When they left on the last train, Percy kept trying to reassure himself.
It's just a story. It's just a story. Oh, Gordon was right. That workman was just pulling my wheel.
The fog grew thicker as time passed, and Percy thought it best to get some sleep. It was almost silent when Percy woke up. It was pitch black, the silence broken by a faint clanking noise in the night. His wheels shuddered as he remembered the story. The chuffing got louder and louder and closer, when all at once there was a shrieking whistle and a great hulk of an engine bellowed past. Percy yelped in fear and closed his eyes. He heard explosions going off as he felt the ground beneath him shake. It was only the fog detonators, but Percy didn't know this. Henry's laughter echoed as he whooshed away towards the viaduct. Percy then realized what had happened, and he felt very foolish.
Fog detonators, he whispered. I should have guessed.
The moment had passed, and everything was quiet again. A gentle whistle of the wind lulled Percy back to sleep. When Percy next awoke, he could once again hear the echo of an engine approaching. It was distant, but he wasn't scared.
Oh, must be Henry coming back again,
he yawned. As the sound grew closer, Percy closed his eyes contentedly. He knew it was just the big engines playing their silly tricks. But as the noise got close to the station, it stopped. Everything went quiet. There was no engine, no wind whistling between the trucks, nothing at all. Percy quickly noticed, and sound returned when he opened his eyes. But it wasn't the sound of movement. It was a faint hissing. It was then that Percy realized there was an engine not a couple yards from his buffers. Percy tried to cry out, but his throat had gone dry, and he could only stare in horror as the old engine sat on the broken points. Steam coiled around their wheels and around its gray paintwork. Behind the engine's smokebox, posed like a spider's legs, a mangle of tubes pointing in all directions. The gray engine continued to glare, but to Percy's horror, no eyes lay behind. The old engine began to move closer and started to open its mouth. Percy looked away and was terrified to see two more engines
stood either side of him where his trucks had been.
The new specters glowed a deep red. Their cabs were crushed, and so were their boilers. One of them had a face that looked like it had been crushed inward by a heavy object. The other had no face at all, its smoke box torn away to reveal broken tubes beneath. Looking between the three, Percy lost control of his breathing. His panic soared, and he closed his eyes tightly. The hissing sound was all that he could hear. He heard it get louder and louder and louder. An almighty explosion echoed throughout the sidings. Percy was sure he'd be knocked off. He then heard a loud crash, followed by another explosion. The little green engine didn't know what to think. He didn't dare to open his eyes and tried to cry out for help, suddenly finding his voice. "Oh, go away! Get away!" he wailed. Steam hissed all around him. It was all too much, too much, too much.
Ah, he's awake.
It was morning. He was sitting in a siding, like he had. Steam gently hissed from his cylinders as warmth spread through his boiler.
"Sorry we didn't wake you up earlier," said the fireman, "but you were dead silent when we arrived."
Percy was too nervous to say anything. His crew looked at him.
"Are you all right, Percy? You look like you've woken from a nightmare."
The driver patted his engine on the buffer. "It's all right now. It was just a dream. Anyway, the points are fixed now. You can get back to the sheds." Percy sighed. He felt a bit better. He was starting to wonder if he really had just dreamt the whole thing up. Until he looked at the points. Next to the switch was something that hadn't been there last night. He had seen them many times when he'd been at the works. An old, rusted fusible plug sat pointing towards Percy. Percy's boiler went cold, and his wheels felt like they might collapse beneath him. Before Percy could get a proper look, the driver took him out of the yards and back to the sheds. When he got back, he was pale and silent. But the silence didn't last. Henry had told Gordon about the fog detonators the night before, and the two laughed and laughed when they saw Percy's terrified expression. They assumed that Henry had got him good, and would go on to tell the others about Percy's night in the sidings. For days afterwards, Percy stayed silent. None of the engines knew why, but he couldn't bring himself to say anything. The little shunter spent ages thinking back to those three spectral engines, trying to rationalize what they might be, but he could never come to a satisfying answer. And to this day, Percy has never told any other engines what he saw. He still isn't sure himself, and always wonders if what the workmen told him was the truth or not.